This jet might be the fastest thing America's ever built. And the craziest part is you're not even supposed to know it exists. People argue about UFOs, but this fighter jet is way different. This is why SR-91 Aurora will be America's new secret weapon. The SR-91. Aurora is the kind of aircraft that sounds fake the moment you say it out loud. Not because it's too futuristic, because it solves a real requirement the US still has, a little too cleanly, like it was built to exist in a world where nobody is allowed to admit it exists. Quiet, compartmented, unnamed in public. And if you're not in the right circle, you don't even know what you're not allowed to know. So why does the Aurora story keep resurfacing? Because the requirement never died. The US still needs something that can go far, go fast, and come back with answers without sitting under anyone's radar long enough to get boxed in. And if you're building that kind of capability, the worst thing you can do is announce it. The moment you confirm it, you give the other side a target to design around. That's why Aurora doesn't feel like a fun rumor. It feels like a rumor with a purpose. Real secrecy isn't one guarded hangar in the desert, it's a machine. Projects split into compartments so nobody sees the full picture. Names buried under boring headings. Paper trails that look harmless on the surface. And inside that world, there are levels. You've probably heard of special access programs, tight circles, controlled information. But people also talk about an even deeper tier. Work that's treated like it doesn't exist at all. No open discussion, minimal documentation. Sometimes the details are passed verbally, only to the people who absolutely need to know. And we know this isn't some conspiracy fantasy because it already happened. The F-117 lived in that shadow world for years before anyone officially admitted it was real. So if you're waiting for a crisp blueprint, with SR-91 Aurora stamped across the top, you're waiting for the wrong kind of proof. This world doesn't give you labels, it gives you silhouettes. And one of the clearest silhouettes is money. Even unclassified budget documents can hint at the shape of the black world, not with a neat line item that says hypersonic spy plane, but with spending folded into vague categories so wide they can hide almost anything. And when the numbers get big enough, tens of billions, you stop thinking of one secret project. You start thinking ecosystem, multiple programs running in parallel, long timelines, quiet procurement, test assets, support aircraft, the kind of infrastructure that can build something in silence and keep it there for a long time. That doesn't prove Aurora exists, but it proves the US has the plumbing to build something like Aurora without ever needing to say the name out loud. And once you accept that, the Aurora story stops being a paperwork argument and becomes an airspace argument. Because the reports people can't let go of seeing a weird light. Their signatures. In the early 1990s, people in Southern California reported sky-splitting booms so violent they thought an earthquake was hitting. Then, some of those events were tracked, and the pattern didn't behave like a normal natural phenomenon. The path read like something moving, cutting across the basin, heading toward the kind of remote test geography that always shows up in America's deepest aviation stories. That's why this legend refuses to die. Not because it's spooky, because it leaves a trace, and then comes the other breadcrumb, the one people describe the same way. The sky markings. These weren't your normal contrails. People described trails that looked broken, like the sky wasn't drawing one clean line, more like it was stamping little rings in a row. In the early 1990s, that exact pattern started showing up in reports over Texas. The phrase that stuck was "donuts on a string," because that's what it looked like, segmented, unnatural, almost deliberate. And then, not long after, similar trails were spotted. Near remote UK bases, places where you expect slow, heavy aircraft coming and going, not something moving like it's testing the limit of the atmosphere. No markings, no confirmation, just a weird signature that didn't fit the usual suspects. Then, the name Aurora enters the chat, and the mess somehow gets more believable. That's what happens with black programs. The name doesn't arrive with a clean explanation. It leaks in sideways, half-mentioned, poorly sourced, debated for years. Some people argue Aurora wasn't even a single aircraft, but a catch-all label for multiple advanced projects. Others say the name was tied to the stealth bomber race that eventually produced the B-2. And honestly, Both possibilities make the same point. Code names aren't permanent. They get recycled, repurposed, and sometimes they're used to keep outsiders chasing the wrong thread. But the strongest part of the Aurora story has never been paperwork. It's the human sightings, the kind that are described once, then buried under silence. Chris Gibson, a trained aircraft observer, claimed he saw a triangular aircraft refueling from a KC-135 while F-111s were in the area, and later sketched what he believed he'd witnessed. Nobody can prove what it was, but the shape, the setting, and the way the story just stops is exactly how real secrecy feels. Not cinematic, not dramatic, just a hard cutoff. And that brings up the question everyone loves to throw out like it ends the conversation. Okay, fine. Where would they even test it? That's not a gotcha. That's the easiest part. Because Groom Lake is sitting there like it always has, Area 51. People treat it like a joke now, but it's still a real test site built for exactly this kind of work. And the runway is the tell, an absurdly long strip on a dry lake bed, the kind of space you only need if something is coming home with high speed and very little margin. That doesn't prove Aurora exists. It just proves the US already has a place where something like Aurora could be tested without asking anyone for permission. But the story starts making sense the moment you stop treating Aurora like a random mystery and start treating it like a replacement problem. Because if something like Aurora exists, it wouldn't appear out of nowhere. It would show up where a very real capability disappeared, and that capability had a name everyone actually agrees on, the SR-71 Blackbird. The SR-71 wasn't built to fight, it was built to know. It could fly so high and so fast that interception felt like a bad joke over Mach 3, up around 85,000 feet, and it needed 2 people because the workload wasn't pilot flies, plane goes. One person flew the machine, the other ran the mission, and the quickest way to understand how extreme it was is the fuel. The Blackbird ran on JP7, a fuel that's deliberately hard to ignite, which meant starts weren't casual. They used a chemical ignition assist, triethylborane, that flared green when it hit air, and the whole process depended on external equipment to spin the engines up before the jet could even sustain itself. That's not trivia. That's a warning label. It tells you this aircraft lived in a performance zone where normal aviation rules don't apply. The engines followed the same logic. The J-58s weren't limited by how much thrust we made at the top end. They were limited by temperature, how much heat the incoming air would dump into the system before the compressor hit its certified limits. In other words, the ceiling wasn't bravery, it was thermal punishment, and once you get into how it actually operated, the SR-71 stops feeling like a myth and starts feeling like a routine that happened to be insane. Would take off light to avoid abusing tires and brakes, climb hard, get up where it wanted to live, and then refueling wasn't a panic moment, it was built into the plan. The support network had to be specialized because feeding fuel to a Mach 3 reconnaissance platform isn't something you do with standard procedures and hope. Even navigation had to be different. The SR-71 used an astro-inertial system that corrected drift by tracking stars, because at those speeds, being slightly off course isn't close enough. The crew wore pressure suits because failure up there isn't uncomfortable, it's immediate. The cockpit had to be controlled, and the fuel wasn't just propellant anymore. It was part of the cooling system, absorbing heat to keep the aircraft and the people inside it from cooking. So when the SR-71 leaves service, the need it served doesn't vanish with it. The world still demands deep, fast, survivable intelligence on demand without sitting slow and exposed in modern air defenses. That's the gap Aurora is supposed to fill, not by being magically stealthy, but by turning speed into practical immunity. At hypersonic velocity, detection and defeat aren't the same thing. A defense network can notice you and still fail to react in time because the timeline collapses. For reconnaissance, that's the whole advantage. You don't need to loiter, you need to pass through, collect, and vanish. But here's the part people always try to skip because it's not sexy. The real fight isn't just propulsion, it's heat. At hypersonic speed, fuel isn't just gas, It's cooling. You run it through the aircraft like a heat sponge, soaking up thermal energy from the skin and the systems, then sending it into the engine so that heat leaves with the exhaust. If you can't control that loop, Mach 5 isn't a mission. It's a quick dash before things start cooking. And a recon aircraft that can only dash isn't a real capability. It's a flex. Then there's the part people forget. Getting to hypersonic speed is often harder than flying at it. Around Mach 1, the air turns nasty. Drag jumps, fuel burn spikes, and the aircraft is usually carrying the most weight it'll ever carry because long range means a lot of fuel. Even the SR-71, built for speed, was designed to punch through that zone fast because the smartest move is spending as little time there as possible. For an Aurora-type machine, the challenge is simple. How do you shove a heavy aircraft through the worst part of the envelope and reach the range where the high-speed mode finally starts paying you back? That's why you keep hearing about combined cycle engines. In plain terms, you need one setup to take off and build speed, and a different setup once you're moving fast enough that the airflow can do part of the work for you. So the idea is, use a turbine to get off the runway and accelerate, then transition to a ramjet or dual-mode ramjet when the speed is high enough. Some concepts even share the same inlet and nozzle, so the system can switch personalities as it speeds up, with the ramjet section acting like a high-speed burner when needed. It's not because engineers think complicated is cool. It's because physics demands a bridge across that ugly middle zone. And then you hit the downside nobody can escape: weight. Even if you solve the biggest headache, getting the aircraft through that brutal speed transition, you're not done. Because everything that helped you get to hypersonic speed turns into a penalty once you're living there. The turbine parts, the moving inlet pieces, the nozzle systems. You need them to take off and accelerate. But at top speed, a lot of that stuff stops helping and starts acting like extra luggage you can't drop. And at hypersonic speed, extra weight isn't just annoying. It costs you fuel, it costs you range, and it makes the whole aircraft harder to keep alive. That's why a real long-range hypersonic recon aircraft probably isn't some sleek little dart. It's a serious machine built around survival, big fuel volume, smart heat management, tight airflow control, materials that can take the punishment. It ends up looking huge because the physics demand it. And once you accept that, the cockpit has to change too. At extreme speed, visibility stops being the priority. A normal windshield becomes a drag problem and a heat problem. And even if you could build a perfect window, what would you actually see at more than a mile a second? By the time your eyes register anything, it's already behind you. So the pilot isn't looking out. The pilot is managing the aircraft, watching temperatures, flying the path on displays, handling emergencies, and keeping the jet inside a very narrow safe zone where it won't overheat or break. And that's exactly why a second crew member becomes necessary. Because sensors and timing are the mission. Someone has to run the collection equipment, hit the target window at the right moment, and make sure that one fast pass produces usable intelligence. That's not sci-fi. That's just workload. So why call it a secret weapon if it's only collecting information? Because reconnaissance is power. Not in a motivational way, literally. The side that sees first makes the other side react late. In a real modern fight, the biggest advantage isn't just who shoots first, it's who sees first. Because the moment you can confirm what's actually happening, who's moving, what's lighting up on radar, what's turning on its comms, you shrink the other side's time to react. And you can feed that information straight into planning and targeting without sending a slow aircraft into the teeth of layered air defenses. And that's where deterrence shifts. Because the enemy's worst feeling isn't only they can hit us, they can watch us, and we can't stop it. That kind of surveillance doesn't just help you win one mission, it forces the other side to spend money like crazy, covering more routes, spreading forces out, building backups, hiding harder, while never being fully sure they've actually escaped your eyes. That uncertainty is expensive. And if Aurora is real, that's what it's really selling. Uncertainty as a weapon. And Aurora wouldn't be a one-off idea either. It sits in the same lane as other hypersonic concepts people talk about, like SR-72. engines that can handle the whole speed range, pushing toward Mach 6 territory, and materials built to survive extreme heat. But here's the part people don't like, because it ruins the invisible superjet fantasy. Hypersonic flight and classic stealth don't always get along. Coatings don't love being baked, and a hypersonic aircraft throws a lot of heat. Physics doesn't care. What's classified? The point isn't invisibility. The point is moving so fast that interception becomes a timing problem most defenses can't solve. So why would the US want this right now? Because great power competition isn't about having the loudest weapons. It's about being able to operate where it matters, when it matters, against defenses designed to punish anything slow. A hypersonic recon platform fits that problem perfectly. Get in, get the intel, get out, fast enough that the information is still fresh. So why keep it buried? Because the moment you confirm it, you give the other side something concrete to build against. The second you confirm a capability, you also give your opponents a blueprint, just not on paper. Now they know what to look for, how to track it, and how to plan around it. They start building the right sensors, they start practicing the right intercepts, and they start shaping their defenses around the way you move. But if you never confirm it, you keep them stuck guessing. And guessing is expensive. That's the whole Black World advantage. It's not just hiding the aircraft, it's hiding the playbook. So if SR-91 Aurora is real, it's not a secret weapon because it looks cool. It's a secret weapon because it turns speed into reach, reach into real-time intelligence, and intelligence into control on a timeline that makes defenses react too late. So here's the question. When the sky cracks with a boom that doesn't match anything on the schedule, is that just a story? Or is that the sound of something already operating? Drop a comment if you're into mission logic over hype. And if you want more breakdowns like this, clean, grounded, and focused on what the job actually demands, subscribe. Because the next rumor might be the real thing.